What's up, everybody? I am Nostalgia Goggles 43. Thanks for checking out the video. So let me start off by telling you a little bit about what I wanted to do here. So I was looking a couple years ago at the success of the Las Vegas Golden Knights in the NHL and how they did very well, made it to the Stanley Cup Finals in their first season in existence. And I'd wondered, I've always been more interested in basketball, if such a thing would be even possible in the NBA. And I thought before that what came to mind immediately with that was NBA Live 1996 for the Super Nintendo and Genesis. Due to the NBA lockout that year, they couldn't have the expansion rosters finalized for the Raptors and the Grizzlies. That was their first season in the league. And therefore, they allowed you to draft them yourself. So I thought, what if I went and did that and tried to put together a team using modern basketball sensibilities in it. So I thought I would share that with all of you. So let's go ahead and get started. Game up here. I apologize, I'm having a headphone malfunction, so hopefully everybody can hear okay. If not, please let me know in the chat. Things aren't working right. But let's take a look. Oh, hey, Dortmunder's here. How's it going, Dortmunder? Thanks for being the first to chat. So I guess a little bit, I'll talk about my equipment first. I am using an actual Super Nintendo, actual NBA Live 96, going through a Japanese capture card, a GX USB 2, seems to be working pretty well. And then for a controller, I actually have a Capcom arcade stick because I am too old to use that dog bone without my hands cramping up. Excuse me. Yeah, along with a three-time machine that brought me back here to do this draft, I also brought some decaf tea because I'm a little bit under the weather today. So hopefully my voice holds out. Let's do the draft. So, how's everything sounding out there, Dortmunder? Hearing everything okay? Is anything too loud? Too quiet? Do a test draft. Before, I'm going to draft both teams just because voice audio needs to be louder, a game a little lower. We can do that. So voice is about at the max that I can do without it clipping, but I'll drop the game a bit. How's that? Too low? Alright. Yeah, because we definitely need to hear all the sneaker squeaking. Goldilocks it. Right in the middle. How about that? Is that just right? Feels good. I like to hear that. All right, so I'm going to draft both teams because I do want for this experiment to really hold any weight at all to the extent that, playing a video game from the 16-bit era has any semblance on reality. I want the rosters to look like they could have looked coming out of a draft. So the AI is pretty good about it, but I do want to stick somewhat close to what happened in real life too, if I can. So that's why I'm controlling the Grizzlies. I'm going to give them mostly people either they actually picked or people the Raptors actually picked, where I'm going a different direction. So Raptors draft first, just like in real life. Now, one of the limitations, something I went really back and forth on with this was whether I wanted to do Super Nintendo or Sega Genesis for this. Now, when I was a kid, I guess I didn't really talk about my history with these basketball games. Video games are really what got me into basketball. I wasn't into sports as a child. It was really NBA Jam that got me following it. And then, of course, the next year, Michael Jordan came back out of retirement. There was a lot of buzz around it. And then I actually did own this game. This isn't my childhood copy, but I had NBA Live 95 and 96 for the Genesis. Then ended up playing 97 and 98 on the PC. I always bought them a year behind. I lost a lot of momentum in the lockout season, and I didn't get quite back into it. But at any rate, the Genesis one is the one I was used to, and that was the one I was planning to stream with. But when I tried them both out, what I found is that the Genesis version is nicer in almost every way. Presentation, the music is better, menus. What I'm about to do tonight would have been a whole lot easier. But the one way in which the Super Nintendo was superior, in my opinion, was the in-game physics. Live 96 for the Genesis certainly feels like it shares an engine with the NHL games of the time. I mean, it might. This one might do. But the physics engine specifically, because everything is just really skatey. There's just no friction at all. And I found too many times I would just go up for a rebound and just continue sailing out of bounds, which might have been okay in NHL 94. And I remember it being pretty okay in NHL 94. But I didn't think you all wanted to watch me jump out of bounds for the rest of the season. SNES it is. And one of the drawbacks of the SNES version is that they only have 12-man rosters instead of the 15-man rosters. We actually won't be drafting even from every team in this game, which is a little lame, but you know what, we'll make it work. So let's start with the starting point guard, and I am going to do precisely what the Raptors did in real life and draft BJ Armstrong first. Even though I know how it's going to turn out, and you'll all see shortly if you don't. But BJ, he was a recent All-Star, championship experience, and look at that, 93-point rating. I mean, this guy right here, a little bit higher, but he was protected for the draft. Armstrong wasn't. That's the other thing. Everyone who's getting drafted here, unless otherwise noted, was actually unprotected during the expansion draft. You don't know how those work. When a new team comes into play, everybody gets a few players that they can protect. And then no other teams can, the expansion teams can't take them, and then anybody else is fair game. So anyway, my understanding from what I've read about it is that BJ had originally expressed interest in playing for Toronto, and so I am going to take him up on that interest and draft him there. And let me just consult my notes here. Make sure I do this in the right order. All right, and the Grizzlies are going to draft the same player they drafted first in real life. Down here on the Knicks bench, Greg Anthony. Ended up playing with the Grizz for several years. I won't talk as much about their draft strategy because I'm not really doing a strategy for them as much. I'm just drafting them. So next, next up for the Raptors, another real-life pick of theirs, Tony Massenburg. Don't get too attached to him, but we will pick him now. Then from the Grizzlies. Now, this is a bit of an ahistorical pick, and one thing that puts a big asterisk on the whole project. So in real life, at this point, the Grizzlies drafted Rodney Dent, who had... I'm not entirely clear on the reasons, I don't remember. I believe he had a career-ending injury before this season, and so he was unprotected. And the Magic had made some kind of deal with the Grizzlies to take him with their second pick, and in exchange, they ended up sending Anthony Evans up to them before the season started. So because roster management is not what we are used to in the future, I'm just going to draft Evans and leave Dent there. But that is something worth pointing out, that for all I know, virtually the whole draft was prearranged like that, right? I'm sure that there were some other incentives going on similar to the Dent situation. That's just one that I happened to read about. It was noteworthy because they took him with such an early pick, and he never played in the NBA again after that. Anyway, that's the Grizzlies next pick. And then we have one that deviates a little bit more from history next for Toronto. I'm going to take our starting small forward. Dale Ellis. So not much of a dunker you see here, but 88 for 3 points. He was actually one of the first major 3-point specialists in the league in the 80s, and we here in Toronto are very excited to add him to the organization. Grizzlies, and what I should have noted was what position everybody played. I'm doing this from memory. I might have to reorder, but hey, I guessed right. So Antonio Harvey from the Lakers goes to the Grizzlies. Next up for us is from the Phoenix Suns, Trevor Ruffin. Now, he's an interesting case. Here, I was reading a little bit about his history. He, in real life, was drafted by the Grizzlies, I believe. And then he ended up not playing with them, signed a contract with Philadelphia, didn't play too much longer in the league. But this was a guy who contributed quite a bit to Phoenix in limited minutes. I think his contribution rate per minute played might have been even league leading in 94-95. And then he wanted to leave because he was third on the depth chart and he was looking for more playing time. And he wasn't convinced by the Grizzlies' vision of what they wanted to do. But I am confident that being from the future, I can explain to him what my plan is and we can convince him to stay. Next, Grizzlies. We have Willie Anderson going to them. Another historical choice for us. We are going to take Lionel Simmons. It's our one of our wings. So Lionel Simmons, when I was reading about this and researching, was noteworthy. He is the only NBA player to have missed playing time officially because of a Game Boy. When the Game Boy first came out, he got tendonitis in his thumb and missed a couple of games due to excessive playing of the Game Boy. So obviously he's a great fit for our team, also a great defender. And I totally agree with you, Dortmunder, that Bukowski would be a really good name for a bad shooter. He was actually a guy I considered taking as well, but ultimately I think Simmons fits in better. It does seem like with a name like Bukowski, you would have picked a different sport. So, Grizzlies select Kenny Gaddison. And then that one start. For us, we're going to take a pick that the Grizzlies drafted in real life. Here, maybe up here. Yep, I see we started with Benoit Benjamin. And don't get too attached to him either. Let's see, so at small forward, the Grizzlies take a guy who I really wanted to make work on the slot, but couldn't figure out a way to get it so that I drafted them instead of the Grizzlies. Byron Scott, who was a member of the Showtime Lakers, championship experience. He ended up in real life being a great leader for the Grizzlies in the early years, great locker room presence. We'll let them have him. Toronto, we take Ed Pinckney. Grizzlies take Gerald Wilkins. I think was related to Dominique. I don't actually remember. Raptors, another real-life pick. We have, I'll skip over Canadian Rick Fox, unfortunately, he was protected. take... Where is he? Am I on the wrong team? Having some controller malfunction all of a sudden. Well, you know what? I'm not going to make you watch me suffer with that. I'll grab the dog bone and back up. That's a bummer. I'll have to figure out what's going on with that. Oh, there he is. Acie Earl. Grizzlies. I don't have a starting center yet, so go with Zant back. There, brothers. Thank you. Ryan PM78 is confirming that that Gerald Wilkins and Dominique Wilkins were in fact brothers. They took him back. Gonna go to Golden State here, team you're gonna see coming up a lot earlier, not just because of, you can see there on the screen that Raptors and the Warriors next to each other, just like in the real finals this year. But they had a lot of preseason relationship. But anyway, so Keith Jennings, the guy who was drafted, top player, he ultimately went to Europe after Damon Stoudamire was drafted. Didn't want to be that low on the depth chart. As is, I entirely blame him. Next up, Grizzlies. Hawks take Doug Edwards. And then we are going to draft Roy Tarpley, who unfortunately never played another NBA game after this. He had some personal problems that took him out of the league. We're not actually drafting him because we're drafting him. I'll show you why we do that in a little while. So the Grizzlies took Doug Edwards, and then they already have starters. Our next pick, they'll take Blue Edwards. I don't actually know what his first name is in real life, what the T stands for, but it was always blue. And next, the Raptors. Portland, take Henson. We're getting into the players that I'm drafting to facilitate roster manipulation at this point. So that's why I'm not talking too much about them. Except for, I did want to preserve this. In real life, Oliver Miller was the Raptors' last pick in the draft. Actually, the last pick overall because there were 27 picks in the real draft. But then he ended up being a major contributor for the team, and he's going to be a major contributor on our team as well, I hope. They go. And then last, Grizzlies take all right, so here's the teams as they're set up now. What's up, Scoops? Naples, New York, getting represented pretty hard. All right, so now next up, we need to edit some players. And now this is another kind of weird thing with the way that the Super Nintendo developers chose to implement the Create a Player feature. On the Genesis, you can just make them, and they have a free agent pool. There's no free agent pool. You can also have empty roster spots on the Genesis. in the SNES, it's a 12-man roster, and every team needs to have exactly 12 people at all times. So the way that they solved this is automatically creating players on every team where they had someone drafted, which is not ideal. But I've taken some notes as far as what needs to be done, and if you're all interested in bearing with me, we will create the player. So I'll start with New Jersey, wherever they ended up. There we go. So another thing about NBA Live 96 is kind of a unicorn in a few ways. One is the expansion draft. This is, to my knowledge, the Genesis and Super Nintendo versions in particular. The PS1 versions and PC versions didn't even have an expansion draft because the lockout was settled by the time the books were released. So I think it's the only sports game ever released on any platform for any sport that allows you to do something like what we just did, other than like fantasy redrafting the entire league or something like that. But they also, this was one of the first games, if not the first, to give you a create a player mode. And they took the opportunity to put in players who were rookies or otherwise not eligible to be in the game. And if you just put in their last name, like I'm doing now, Stoudamire, look at that, there's a little pause, and all of a sudden, we have a 5'10" point guard from Arizona with all of Damon Stoudamire's stats. Imagine that. So anyway, we've created him on New Jersey here. I certainly wasn't going to create New Jersey's actual rookie from this year, because, I don't want to upset people. That'll be good for Damon, and then we'll create Toronto's other draft pick from that year, who was Jimmy King. I'm trying to remember if I need to put a space or a period, but I'll find out. You'll all find out with me. Thanks for being here, everyone. I really do appreciate it. You get to see the inner workings of the organization now. GM mode. I guess I did need to do it. Nope, it's not it either. Maybe period space. Third time's a charm. It's the perils of live streaming, guys. You get to see how the sausage is made in real time. My kingdom for a keyboard. There we go. Alright, there's Jimmy King. And might as well do the rest of them while we're in here. So on Chicago. We'll make some baseball player they had on their roster this year for some reason. Clippers get Brent Berry, son of Rick, fancy dunker. I spell that wrong? thought it was BA and not BE. Maybe B? All right. Wrong button. There we go. That's more like it. Sacramento. Gonna do Tyus Edney. Edney was interesting. He was actually a second-round pick who ended up making the all-rookie team, being a major contributor to the Kings of this era. So that was how I picked this. Another thing is we don't have enough roster spots or created players to put the entire rookie class in 95 in this game. I just put in the ones who made the biggest splash in the year that they entered the league, or who I need for another reason, like this player I'm creating now, Sean Rusberg. Future Raptor. In real life and in the game too. Spoiler alert. Not the outset. This is going to be a mid-season trade for us. Boston gets... Who does Boston get? Williams. Very unique last name, and this is where I have another confession to make. I actually am not sure I remember which Williams this is. That's very embarrassing. Thought I was prepared for this. Guess you can only prepare so much. Golden State, #1 overall pick this year, and they used it to draft Joe Smith. Probably the only Joe Smith in the country. These are both just such uncommon names. Is that everybody? No. Not quite. So this is, if you haven't figured out, the B group is the people Toronto drafted, and the A group is the people Vancouver drafted. That's the only real distinction. I'm not quite sure. R-E-S-P-E-R-T, find out what he means to me. Well, it's going to mean quite a bit to our run, I think. Like, I'm not sure he would have actually had the same career trajectory if he played today. I'm not too familiar with his college career. I don't remember it from the time, but at least his three-point rating in this game is just monstrous. And you know, a guy like that doesn't only play a couple of seasons these days. Someone finds a role for him. Portland gets Randolph Childress. Denver, Antonio McDyess. Great player. I say like there's any player who's played in the NBA who's not a great player. Yeah, everything's relative, right? But you wouldn't make it to that level if you weren't pretty great. So I missed which team this was. So I'm going to go back. Detroit. Theo Ratliff. Terrific defender, great name. I have no idea what's up with the kerning before you lock in the name. At least it doesn't stay that way. Ratliff, last one in this group. On Phoenix, we have not a rookie. And we have, I'll just give them some TNT color commentator. I think he's a golfer, too. All right. I think that does it for that bank. Now, halfway there. Y'all still hanging in there? All doing good? Lakers got Frankie King. It's here. 2 Kings. And Indiana. Travis Best. Stark contrast to Frank Brakowski. Farewell, Scoops 417. Thank you for joining. You're welcome back anytime. Houston. Houston gets a guy I put in here for sentimental reasons. I neglected to mention the other big reason that I got into basketball in the mid-90s, which was that that was Syracuse University's first return to the Final Four in quite some time. I'm from the Syracuse area originally, so no, I'm not Canadian. Just picked the Raptors for because I do admire Canada. I grew up near Canada, but at any rate, Lawrence Moten was a guy on that Orange team that made the Final Four. And one of the things I thought was really cool was I had never seen in my life, and rarely have since, really, an entire community just really rally around one specific thing the way everybody rallied around Syracuse during that run. It was a bit unexpected. They were an underdog going in, as they tend to be when they make their Final Four berths. But just everywhere you went, everyone was wearing orange, and it was just a really cool thing to see, and I wanted to be part of that. So that was when I first started following it. So anyway, Lawrence Moten didn't have the most exciting NBA career, not as exciting as some of the other names you've seen and will see as I keep creating people, but I couldn't not include him, especially since he was drafted by the Grizzlies. That's where he will be going, even though we're making him on Houston now. San Antonio. Kirk Thomas. Oh, really? Too many Thomases, I guess. New York. Trent. Gary Trent, I think. Been a few years. Orlando. Another player who will be destined for Canada, but the other coast. Brian Big Country Reeves. Y'all remember Big Country? That's not Big Country. That's weird. Oh well. We'll fix it in post. I'm not going to make you guys sit through all the weird stuff that happens. I'm just going to do what I plan to do, and then we will fix it in the preseason. Season, by the way, starts next Tuesday. It's the same day the actual NBA season starts, so I thought I'd tip off with them, celebrate. Raptors will be playing the Nets back when they were in New Jersey. Cleveland. This is Michael Finley. It's actually destined for Phoenix, but as you may remember, we had to put somebody else on Phoenix first. Never hear the end of it, but put Finley on the team before him. Atlanta. Alan Henderson. Utah. Not going to stay here, but get Jerry Stackhouse. Normally I really like that name, Stackhouse. Entering it one letter at a time. Don't like as much, but hardly his fault. He was drafted by Philadelphia. I mostly remember him as a Piston, where he spent a lot of the years when I was paying attention to the league. Bullets. Back when they were the Bullets. They get Rasheed Wallace. All right, what am I doing? Turns out it works better when you put in the last name, which it's expected. Minnesota. Kevin Garnett. Some of you may have heard of him. I remember the controversy when he was drafted. He was first player in some years to be drafted directly out of high school. Obviously ended up working out okay for him. And the guy next year who was drafted right out of high school, Kobe Bryant. Probably have heard of him too. Is that everybody? Did we get through it? All right. For a 1996 game, the synth music is quite decent. Yeah, and the crazy part is the Genesis version has even better music than this. The opening theme to this one's a little rough, but the rest of the music I do enjoy. It's got a nice groove to it. Alright, so now that everybody is created, the next step is to get them where they are supposed to be. This is a little bit fun because since there are no free agents and everyone has to have exactly 12 players on a team at any given time, that means that, and they're all 1-for-1 trades. You can't even do a 2-for-2 or a 3-for-3 when it's even. So what we'll do is I'm going to start with Atlanta because that's where my notes are written down, and we'll see if things end up looking at least somewhat like an NBA team when we're all done here. So Alan Henderson, I think, is already on here. He is. Yep. And then, so Tyrone Corbin going to Sacramento. Spud Webb, another great dunker. 5'7", won the slam dunk contest. My hero. Let's see, and then Anderson going to San Antonio because he needs to be on San Antonio. And coming back is a very, very late career Moses Malone, who actually retired in the offseason, but they put him in the game anyway. So he didn't end up playing for the Hawks, but we need to keep the rosters even, so Hawk he shall be. Heck of a time to come down with a cold. That's it for Atlanta. Boston. Okay, so this is a fun one. So we're going to send Strong to Lakers. For Smith. And then he goes to Phoenix. Danny Shades. Another Syracuse product. He goes to Miami. You can see where this is going. I think this is the longest chain we have, actually. For Matt Geiger. Where's he at? He's going to go to Charlotte. David Wingate, who I believe was actually the one drafted from Charlotte in the real-life expansion draft, if memory serves. I could be wrong about that, though. Might be fake news. No, I guess not, because he's going to Seattle, unless he was a preseason trade. Seattle, or Sarunas Marciulionis. I certainly hope I'm saying that correctly. Another of the best names of the NBA in the period. He's going to Sacramento. Randy Brown going to Chicago. Pete Myers. Back to Miami. For Harold Miner. Miami essentially swapped their entire roster between when this game was published and when the season actually started. So, seeing a lot of heat. Miner goes to Cleveland. For Mark Price. Sad to see that this was the season Mark Price was not in Cleveland for most of his career there, but he will be heading to Washington. To Denver. Ricky Slater. To Portland. Bryant. Oh, what was his first name? Not Kobe. Somebody else. This is still part of that same chain when we started. This was really fun to figure out how to optimize it where everybody ended up where they were supposed to be. Trevor moves across Texas. I love seeing all the old logos in this. It really takes me back. Pierce. I wonder which Pierce that was. It wasn't Paul. He wasn't in the league yet. Poor Philadelphia. Only team in the league this year in real life who had only team in the East anyway, who had a worse record than the Raptors. I guess the process took a while. Boston Humphries. Oh, sorry. I did that wrong. Oh, I just swapped it, yeah. And that's it. Finally done with Boston. Next, Charlotte. The rest of them will be a lot less complicated than that. So, Hersey Hawkins going to Seattle. Kendall Gill. He goes to Minnesota temporarily. For Stacey King. This game goes to Miami again. For this Reeves. And that's it for Charlotte. Chicago does have Jordan. We send Will Perdue to San Antonio. For this gentleman here, U.S. Ambassador to North Korea, Dennis Rodman. Corey Blunt. Up on the Lakers. Massenburg. He actually didn't play that season, so we're just moving him around to get John Sally off of Miami. Now, John Sally is a guy who was drafted by the Raptors in the expansion draft and then ended up buying out his contract and signing with the Bulls mid-season when they were gearing up on their championship run. But because of the 12-man rosters, it was easier to just set him up there on the Bulls to begin with. So that's where he is. So, Wally Krzyzewski. Denver. He didn't play either, so just moving some things around. There actually were a lot of Bulls in the game. Ended up having to ship one of them off to another team because there were 13 people who played for Chicago primarily or entirely who ended up in the game. Anyway, for Ryan Williams, later became Bison Dele. Goes to Portland. For another Edwards. J. Edwards. John? I don't know. Maybe remembering that. Cleveland. Utah. Or John Crotty. That way. And then who did we put on Michael Finley? That's right. So he's going to Phoenix. Or Antonio Lang. Boston. Feels weird to give them a big name like Dominique Wilkins, who retired before this season, just to sit on the bench. But I guess if Atlanta is going to get Moses Malone, Dallas can get Dominique. And then Jimmy King, who actually did end up getting traded to Dallas after his first year with the Raptors. He was a Raptors draftee, so we'll send him to Toronto and put Roy Sharpley back. What we got? So that's why I drafted Sharpley, so that I can send him back. Next we have Denver. From they did get McDice, they did. Los Angeles. I was just admiring the Clippers' new uniforms. People are saying it looks like the Grand Theft Auto font. I can see where they're coming from, although certainly GTA didn't invent that font. Who knows if that's what they were going for or not. Well, maybe somebody knows, of course. I didn't read in detail about it. All the way at the other end of the country. I got a team to manage here. Great shooter. I was trying to figure out a way to get him on the team that wouldn't be too ahistorical, but didn't happen. Knicks. Who did I make on the Trent? Thorpe is on Detroit. Addison goes to Charlotte for good. Victor Alexander, who, actually, I'm not going to do that one yet. Just undo that. Let's talk through this a little bit. So, unfortunately, I've just heard from B.J. Armstrong's agent, and he no longer wishes to play for the Raptors. He's asked for a trade, and so we're going to send him to Golden State. Now, in real life, the Raptors got 5 players and some draft picks for B.J. Armstrong. Because of the nature of this, I am not going to bother doing that. So instead, I'm just going to do 1-for-1 for the one player who did end up with significant time in playing time in Toronto, the great Carlos Rogers. So we will do that. We are very sorry to see BJ go. I tried to convince him that I am from the future. That, these goggles aren't just for show. But whatever. Hopefully he will be happy in San Francisco. Excuse me. So Victor Alexander was one of those 5 players, but he didn't particularly play. So instead, we're just going to use his roster spot to facilitate some of these other trades, like getting Jerome Kersey into the Warriors. Actually, he was another guy who was taken in the expansion draft but didn't end up signing with the team. I don't really know how that works, like how you can be drafted and then not sign with the team that drafted you, but then also sign with another team that same season. You'd think as a general manager I would understand the contract process a little bit better, but alas, I don't. Maybe someday. This is my first year on the job. And then now we have a guy who is going to be, I think, the linchpin of our whole offense, Tracy Murray. He was a free agent after the season, signed with Toronto, played for the Raptors. I think he might have actually been the only Raptor in the first season to play all 82 games. And look at this three-point rating. 95, that's ridiculous. I'm pretty sure Reggie Miller only has like a 93 in it. But Tracy Murray did lead the league in three-point shooting percentage in 93-94, I think it was. So, it's earned. But yeah, so very excited about that, and especially a small forward, since we're kind of doing small ball. At least we'll have a somewhat larger presence in there. So let's see, which player was I going to send? Tracy Murray. I suppose it could be anybody who didn't play. I think it was. Yeah, it sounds right. I can always fix it later. And then Lawrence Moten going I have this written down as going to Miami, but he's not. He's supposed to be going to Vancouver. I'll just send him to Miami for now. Let's keep rolling. I'll fix it later. Don't get too used to the beaches, Lawrence. All right, Indiana next. And yeah, we can confirm what Reggie Miller's three-point rating is. Yeah, 93. So Tracy Murray, there you go. Higher rated than Reggie Miller. Let's see. guys didn't really talk about the goggles much. They're for protection. Time travel is a very dangerous business, so you need to come prepared. I actually didn't ever play basketball at a particularly high level. I never even played varsity. I never got farther than JV. I had a career-ending injury in my sophomore year, which is another story. But when I did play, before I got contact lenses, I actually did have a pair that were not dissimilar to this. Inspired by Horace Grant, of course. Yeah, so believe it or not, this is not the first pair of goggles like this I've owned in my life. Billy? Or Burton? Where are you, Burton? There you are. Clippers. They already have Brent Berry. Dent, already mentioned, didn't play. But the Clippers had too many players. Need to get them that. Lakers are all set. Miami. Glenn Rice. This was a big deal. I remember this trade when I was following it. Glenn Rice for Alonzo Mourning. Shaking things up in the Atlantic Division. Milwaukee's all set. Minnesota, do we already have Garnett? We do. And this Reeves going to Grizzlies for Garland. Brown to Philly. Philly had a lot of roster changes as well this season. I just wrote that it was the did not play player from Cleveland, so I'm trying to remember who I sent down battle. That's right. Guess rather than trying to remember it, I could just check my notes. Thanks, notes. Jersey. This was a large number of player trades. Derek Coleman, another Syracuse product. Sixers for the extremely tall Sean Bradley. Like, how tall is he? I'm trying to remember. Yeah, 7'6". Extremely tall. Much taller than Damon Stoudamire. That was one of the things, I'm not going to pretend that I'm a longtime Raptors fan. I don't think I myself was jumping on the bandwagon. As mentioned, I had this idea before they actually won the championship this last year. But I didn't always think they were cool. I was 10 years old when the team came into existence, and they had, the Jurassic Park was awesome, and they had a raptor as their logo, so I was sold. And then, Damon Stoudamire for, average height people like myself, anybody who is under 6 feet tall and can succeed at that level, automatically win in my book. He had a cool Mighty Mouse tattoo, so I was into it. Begins next. Finally, Walters or Perry. And we won't have Damon Stoudamire playing center for the Nets. That doesn't seem like it would end well for anybody. And they'll keep getting. Knicks are all set. Magic are all set. Philadelphia's good now. Phoenix. Dan Marley leaves. Cleveland. I'm sure Ryan's very sad about that. Big Dan Marley fan, as I recall. So we already have Trent here from New York. Yep, so Portland's all set. Sacramento's all set. Yeah, they got Jack Haley, so they're all set. Field. For Gray Dortmunder. Brikowski's moving. Building a new house in Seattle. That's actually really what I should have done with my time machine, is I should have gone back to 1995 and purchased some real estate in Seattle. And then I could come back to my time and retire. So we got Stoudamire, we got King. Raptors are set. We'll come back and talk through the lineup a little bit. Grizzlies are all set. So these guys got to be pretty close. That's Kyle's. Or PJ Tyler. Guy who didn't play that season. Duckworth goes to Milwaukee. Denver. I think if I remember right, someone can fact check here. I think his first name might actually have been Don, like the American Pie guy. And that is it, other than fixing some of the lineup things, but no, I'm not going to make you all watch me do that. So let's talk through the team a little bit. So we already talked about a lot of them as they came through, but Tracy Murray, actually, why don't I exit out of this? I'll just have the Raptors lineup and then go through and clean up everybody else offline. Thanks for sticking through all the way to the end here. So Tracy Murray is actually going to swap with Dale Ellis and is starting small forward. Ellis, I might actually start at shooting guard and have Ruffin be the sixth man. Let's see. Alvin Miller, center. Can move Carlos Rogers to power forward. That makes more sense. And for Stoudamire, and I guess you can't actually see the number here, so I'm actually sporting a Stoudamire jersey for the occasion. We'll start at point guard. Yeah, so here's the starting five. Oliver Miller at center, Carlos Rogers at power forward, Tracy Murray at small forward, Dale Ellis shooting guard. Moving back to shooting guard, he was listed as a small forward in the game, but when he was in Seattle, he played shooting guard. And then Damon Stoudamire at point. So other than Dale Ellis, this is not too dissimilar to a lineup that you might actually have seen in Toronto at some point. So, and you can see the bench here, and with the exception of Trevor Ruffin and Lionel Simmons, the rest of the bench is probably going to be moving in mid-season trades, but that's what we have to start. So thanks so much for joining us, everybody. So we are going to tip off the season on Tuesday of next week, 22nd at 9 p.m. All the games will be at 9 p.m. and that'll be the start as your Toronto Raptors take on the New Jersey Nets. Thanks again for watching. Have a great night.